All right, guys. Very excited about this message. The name of it is going to be Afraid and Dismayed, Sticks and Stones. Afraid and Dismayed, and then in parentheses, Sticks and Stones. Here recently I've done some messages and it's been pretty fun, and I had a really fun one called May the Force Be With You. But in this message, this one is one of my more serious, almost kind of prophetic messages because I really feel like this message is for somebody. I'm really speaking to somebody or some people in this message. And I'm speaking to some people who maybe you're at a point now where you've been believing God for something. And it might be different things for different people. You're ready for Him to get you out of the rut that you're in. You're ready for Him to pull you out of a mess that you're in. And maybe you're just wanting Him to help you get from point A to point B, help you get into something better, to have better things in your life, whatever the case may be. But in this process of getting so close to your breakthrough, getting so close to whatever it is that you're seeking, whatever it is that you're waiting on, you see the light at the end of the tunnel. You know you're almost there, but it seems like the close you get to it, the closest you get, you're starting to feel something. Maybe you're sad, but you're sad for unnecessary reasons. Maybe it seems like any little thing that someone does or says ticks you off and makes you want to blow up. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it makes you so sad that you break down and cry at the drop of a hat. In other words, even though you might be big on walking in faith, you might be big on not walking in the flesh and trying to walk by the Spirit. Maybe you're big on not going by feelings. But somehow, as you see this light at the end of the tunnel and you know you're almost there, it seems almost like every little poke and jab from the enemy, every little poke and jab from strangers, every little poke and jab to right down to the people you care about the most. It seems like any little thing is just pressing all of your buttons and you just shut down, and maybe you feel so broken and tired and tattered and you just don't understand what's going on. You don't quite get what it is, why it is. And it seems like just little things that people say and do, and even sometimes just simple thoughts in your head, are starting to build up and take up unnecessary space in your mind and in your heart, to the point where it just seems like thoughts and threats overwhelm you and consume you, to the point where it causes you to lose focus on God, and losing focus when you're so close to that light. Maybe, just maybe, this message is for you. And if the title of this, the sticks and stones part of this title, sounds familiar, it should. If many of you remember as kids, one of the things that we would hear people say, other kids sing a lot, was, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me." Right? Isn't that what they said? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. It was a way of saying, you might throw some things at me and it might hurt a little bit, but the words that you say, nothing that comes out of your mouth will hurt me. Nothing that you say will hurt my feelings. And maybe you've said that a time or two, but it seems like lately the words do hurt. Little itty bitty things that people say do rub you the wrong way. It does make you break down and cry. Even if it means being somewhere in private and having to let the tears flow, it just seems like the words really do hurt. I have some good news for you. The good news is that there's some things that are at your advantage at this point in the game, even before you've gotten to the light, all the way to the light at the end of the tunnel. But for some reason, you've yet to see it because you're in your feelings and in your flesh. And one of the things that you must understand, one of the advantages that you have now is that the sticks and the stones are in your hands now. They're not in the hands of the enemy anymore. The sticks and the stones are in your hands. And so the reason why these words hurt you is because that's all the devil has left. That's all the devil has left to come at you with is words. All he can do is send threats. All he can do is drop thoughts in your mind to get you being wound up in your mind to where you stress and worry about things that could happen even though nothing bad has quite happened yet. That's all he has left is words. So he'll drop thoughts in your minds when he speaks to you, and then he'll use humans, he'll use people to say some things here and there to get you fired up, to get you wound up. And the reason why it seems like everybody's coming at you with all these negative things to say and all these rude things to say, the only reason why this is happening is because the enemy knows that all the quote-unquote sticks and stones that he has used against you, you have now picked them up. All his tools of warfare, you have now picked them up. They're in your possession. They're in your hand. You have the advantage. You're almost at the light at the end of the tunnel. And because you're there and you see it now and you're almost there as a last resort and as a last minute tactic. All he knows to do is use words. And so because you've been in the battle and because you've been warned and because you've weathered the rain and stood the test of time, it's caused your flesh to be weak, which is good because you're relying on the strength of the Lord. But he's trying to take advantage of you being weak in the flesh by saying, well, if I throw some words at her or if I send some threats his way, that'll just wear that flesh down more and he'll break down and cry. And if they get upset too much, they'll start to think even more negative thoughts about themselves and say, well, what's wrong with me? Why is this happening? When in reality, all you got to do is keep standing strong, because all it is last minute desperate attacks of the enemy to keep you sitting still. Let me say that again. Last minute desperate attacks, because he's desperate. You think you're desperate. See, all these words being said to hurt you, it's just an illusion to make you feel all hurt and desperate and needy. But in reality, he's desperate and he's needy and he's trying to project how he feels upon you because he knows you're almost there. It's one thing to be almost there, but when you see it, when you see the light and you're reaching out for it, that's when he really gets desperate. Because you've walked by faith for so long, and now God is just saying, okay, let me go ahead and you've walked by faith. You know what? Here, I'm going to dangle this out in front of you. I'm going to let you get just a glimpse of what you have to look forward to. I'm not going to show it all to you, but I'm going to reward you. I'm going to go ahead and just give you a glimpse. You know, you've made it this far on faith, so let me just go ahead and just show you just a little bit of what you have to look forward to. Now, eyes haven't seen and ears haven't heard, neither has entered into the heart of man of what God has stored up for you. So you don't know it all just yet, but I'm just going to show you a glimpse. And just from this glimpse, it's going to just drive you nuts. It's going to drive you wild. It's going to give you that extra to make it the rest of the way. Even when you feel like you're stumbling and you just can't make it another day because you feel depressed and oppressed and you feel pressed on every side from the enemy. I'm going to show you just this little bit of a glow of something, just this little bit of a something, and it's going to give you that extra motivation to just keep going until you make it through. And so the enemy is desperate. He was already desperate that you were close, but now that he knows you see it coming, and you really ain't going to give up now because you done got so close. Oh, he's desperate. So he's going to use any and every willing vessel that he can use to annoy you and hurt you and belittle you and humiliate you, just like how God is using you as much as he can because you're being willing to be an open vessel for him. That's all it is. It's just a game the devil plays. It's just his games, the wiles of the devil, as we say. That's all it is. Go with me to Deuteronomy, chapter 31. We're going to start here at the first start of this, the first verse, the beginning. It says this. Deuteronomy 31 verse 1, it says, And Moses went and spake these words unto all Israel. And he said unto them, I am 120 years old this day. I can no more go out and come in. Also the Lord hath said unto me, Thou shalt not go over this Jordan. So we know how things have played out. We know Moses was the it guy. He was used by God to lead his people out of slavery and out of bondage from the Egyptians. And so they went on their journey. And I mean, God really just did a mighty work to help them get free. But here's the thing, in the process of their traveling to go to their promised land, there were a lot of hiccups along the way where there was a lot of rebellion and a lot of people just causing Moses trouble. And so because people were not fully engaged to do what God needed for them to do, they made a journey that really shouldn't have taken that long to make, and they dragged it out so that it lasted years upon years, to the point where they spent a lot of time just doing this, basically just kind of going in circles. And so as the years went by, people died off to the point where generations died off. And so finally, now that the people's flesh, oh goodness, do you hear what I'm saying? Now that the people's flesh have been worn out real good, and they're tired and weary, and they've gotten to the point where they're like, okay, if we want to get out of this wilderness, we're going to have to let go of our own needs and desires. We're going to have to follow God. We can't keep going in circles. We're dying off. A lot of the people that are here are not the original people that were brought out of the land of Egypt from slavery. So some of these people are some new young folk that have gotten in at the last minute. You know what I mean? I mean, look, if we're going to get there, we need to do it now. Here's our chance. While everybody's got some act right, let's go ahead and let's do what we need to do. We don't need to rebel. We don't need to question Moses. We don't need to question God. We need to just go and do it. We don't need to let fear consume us. We don't need to worry about what the other people, what the other nations think, what they're going to say, how different we're going to be from everybody else, because we're supposed to be different, because we're a chosen people, a chosen generation. We're supposed to be holy, sanctified, set apart, the whole 9 yards. We just need to do what it is that God wants us to do. They finally got it. However, in the process of them finally getting it together, it gets to the point where now Moses can't even be used to send them into the promised land. I mean, if it's not one thing with these folks, it's another. I tell you what. I tell you what. So as we see in these couple of verses that I read, Moses, it gets to the point where it said that Moses, he can't cross the Jordan with them, because once they cross the Jordan, they're finally into their promised land. And God's like, no, Moses, you can't go with them. I have to use somebody else. I've got to use Joshua to lead them the rest of the way. Look at this. Verse 3, the Lord thy God, he will go over before thee, and he will destroy these nations from before thee, and thou shalt possess them. And Joshua, he shall go over before thee, as the Lord hath said. And the Lord shall do unto them as he did to Sihon and to Og, the kings of the Amorites, unto the land of them whom he destroyed. And the Lord shall give them up before your face, that ye may do unto them according unto all the commandments which I have commanded you. Now look at this. Verse 6, look at it. Look at how it starts out. It says this, be strong and of a good courage. If you think about that, that's the opposite of this title. The name of this message is Afraid and Dismayed. But this says, be strong and of good courage. So God's saying, be strong and of good courage. Let's keep going. Fear not, nor be afraid of them, for the Lord thy God, he it is that doth go with thee. He will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. So it's being said that God has your back. Verse 7, and Moses called unto Joshua and said unto him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and of good courage, For thou must go with this people unto the land which the Lord hath sworn unto their fathers to give them, and thou shalt cause them to inherit it. So what we see is this: God has made it plain that Joshua's going to be the one that finishes leading these people into the promised land. And Moses has to be humble enough to bring Joshua forth before the people and say, with them standing together, okay, he's going to pick up where I left off. So Moses has to be willing to not be jealous, not be envious, not have something against Joshua, not to be spiteful towards him, because it's not like Joshua purposely decided to overstep Moses. We saw that with Korah. Right? Remember how that played out with Korah, and Korah getting other people to try to come up against Moses and say, oh, well, hand some of these tasks down to us. Let us have some leeway, some positions, some, you know what I mean? Let us be some somebodies in this. And tried to make Moses seem like the bad guy, like he was trying to be a prince or a king over the people, when really he was just trying to do what God said. And so Korah basically caused a lot of rebellion. Listen, Moses could have looked back on that and tried to pin that off on Joshua and say, oh, well, Joshua is just being like another Korah. But that's not how it played out. This is not something that Joshua has decided. This is a decision from the Lord. So Moses must go along with this. He really ain't got much of a choice. And at this point, as tired as he is and as old as he is, if I was in his shoes, I'd actually be excited. I'd be like, okay, I've wandered through this wilderness enough. As long as y'all make it there, I'm going to be proud. And I'm going to go sit down somewhere because I'm tired. I've done my job. I've done what I'm supposed to do. Okay, God says I'm done here, so I ain't gonna argue with him. Don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed it. It's been a pleasure. It's been real. It's been fun, but it hasn't been real fun. So I'm gonna go sit down. So it's all good. And let's look at what it says in verse 8. It says, and the Lord, he it is that doth go before thee. He will be with thee. He will not fail thee, neither forsake thee. Now look at this. Fear not, neither be dismayed. Don't be afraid or dismayed. So what does dismayed even mean? Well, it is translated from the Hebrew word kathath, and there's a figurative and a literal definition. The figurative definition is to break down by confusion and fear. So basically, to tear someone down, not literally, of course, but figuratively, by confusion and fear. And that ties into what some of you may be feeling, as I explained at the beginning of this. It just seems like every little thing someone does or simply says, little stuff, it just seems like it tears you down, doesn't it? It just seems like it just wears you out. And as you see the light, these things that are being said, it's almost bringing not only fear, but a little bit of confusion, because you're thinking, well, if I'm this close, then why is all this going on? Shouldn't I be stronger? So it's there to cause you fear and strife, but confusion. But don't be confused. Know that you're on the right track, and it is playing out the way it's supposed to play out. It's playing out exactly how it's supposed to play out, because it's there to wake you up, to show you that you have finally held on to the Lord for all your strength. We know how it goes in Philippians. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. You have finally held on to the strength of Christ long enough, and yeah, it has wore your flesh out, and that's fine. That is fine. Don't flip out about it. Don't flip out. You're good. It's just the enemy doing his last minute stuff. Let him do what he does. He's afraid. He wants you to be afraid because he's afraid. He wants you to be confused because he's confused, because he thought he had you in the bag. He thought he had you right where he wanted you. That's it. That's all it is. It's just this last minute little stuff. So do not be afraid or dismayed. And that's the figurative definition, to break down by confusion and fear. But now here's the literal definition. It says to be shattered, broken, or terrified. And the thing that came to my mind when I read that was, it was like in my head, it was like I saw almost like somebody looking at their reflection in a mirror, and all of a sudden the glass just shattering and falling down, symbolizing that person just being broken and shattered and falling down like broken glass. And that's how some of you probably feel, like somebody could just touch you and you could just crumble at the seams, just shatter and break into pieces. And you're thinking, I know I have strength from the Lord, but why do I feel this way? It's just your flesh being wore out. It's okay. You're good. Don't flip out about it. Don't be confused. Don't be afraid or dismayed. Because the sticks and stones, they're in your hands now. Don't let the words hurt you. Just keep going. Just keep going. You're good. I'm just here to let you know you're good. Don't be confused. Don't worry. Don't stress out. Don't let the thoughts take over your mind. Stay focused. Don't be distracted. They're just distractions. Because you're almost there. It's just last minute distractions. You didn't do nothing wrong. Just keep going. You're good. To be shattered, broken, and terrified. And then here's an alternate definition: to be prostrate. And a lot of times in the Bible, when it comes to the word prostrate, especially in the Old Testament, you think of somebody lying prostrate as a way of worshiping God, getting down on one's face to worship God. But here it means to be prostrate from the point of view of being afraid, not fear to God, but just fear to something or somebody else. So it's almost like somebody breaks you down with fear and confusion to where you're so timid and afraid. And then it's like any little thing will shatter you to where you will fall and be prostrate in fear. Just a continuous slow breaking down till you feel like nothing, till you feel like all you can do is just lay down on the floor prostrate and cry in fear. Not in reverence to God, but in fear to the enemy. This is not the time to let the enemy scare you, because God's got you. So, if this is being told to these people, what do we know? We know that there's probably some thoughts forming in these people's heads. Even though they're ready and even though they're obedient, there are probably some people that may be having some thoughts and thinking, well, how is this going to be when we go into this new land? They're probably worried about other people, other nations, or other groups, or other tribes of people having something to say and causing them new problems. They may feel a bit of unworthiness and think that maybe someone will come along and try to make them slaves like the Egyptians did. They probably got all kinds of thoughts forming into their head, because when you walk onto new territory, even if you've been told prior to it that it's yours, you still may be a little nervous. You're still thinking and you got all these thoughts in your head. And so God's basically let them know, don't let these thoughts consume you. Be not afraid or dismayed. Stand strong. Listen. Be brave, be courageous, have strength, and be of good courage, as he said. So don't be afraid and dismayed. Have strength and courage. In other words, be the opposite of what these thoughts are telling you. You have to believe my report, not the report of the enemy, is what it all comes down to. Now let's go over to Joshua. Very next book of the Bible, Joshua. We'll start at chapter 5. Let's see here. Joshua chapter 1, starting at verse 5. Joshua 1, starting at verse 5. It says this: There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee nor forsake thee. So Joshua is being made clear to Joshua. Listen, God's letting them know, I'm going to be with you every step of the way through this. As you step up to the plate, I'm going to step up with you. I'll be right there with you the way that I was with Moses. Now, he didn't say that I'll work through you the same way that I worked with Moses. In other words, you're not going to talk like him and act like him and dress like him and think like him necessarily. I'm just going to be with you through the process. I'm going to be with you as you step into his position. In other words, you're still you. You're still going to be who I created you to be. You're just going to keep continuing to do what I've told you to do, and I'm going to be with you every step of the way. That's it. And so, with that said, these people have to acknowledge the fact that they cannot look at Joshua and expect him to be just like Moses. They are to expect him to lead them into the promised land. That's it. To do what it is that God has called him to do. He has to be who God has called him to be and created him to be, not who the people have called him to be and to be created to be. Because they didn't create him. They're the created. God's the creator. So if the people are saying one thing and God's saying the other, Joshua has to go with what God says. Right? He has to just be thankful and be humble and be thankful for the fact that he's taking on this big and mighty position. He's got some big shoes to try to fill. So his job is to just keep growing and keep taking it to the next level. It's not a competition. It's just a done deal. There's no competing here. It's just helping everybody else pick up from where they last left off. That's simple. And so he says to him in verse 6, be strong and of a good courage. So he's saying it again. For unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage. So he's continuously encouraging him and just saying, hey, follow the rules. Just do what I'm telling you to do. Not follow the rules of the people, follow my rules, and continue to be courageous. Verse 9, have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. Don't be afraid or dismayed. Be courageous. For the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. Verse 10, then Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, pass through the host, and command the people, saying, prepare you victuals, for within 3 days ye shall pass over this Jordan to go in to possess the promised land, which the Lord your God giveth you to possess it. And to the Reubenites and the Gadites and to half the tribe of Manasseh spake Joshua, saying, remember the word which Moses the servant of the Lord commanded you, saying, the Lord your God hath given you rest, and hath given you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your cattle shall remain in the land which Moses gave you on this side Jordan, but ye shall pass before your brethren armed, all the mighty men of valor, and help them, until the Lord hath given your brethren rest, as he hath given you, and they also have possessed the land which the Lord your God giveth them. Then ye shall return unto the land of your possession, and enjoy it, which Moses the Lord's servant gave you on this side Jordan toward the sun rising. So we see now, after God is dealing with Joshua and just doing what he says, following him, stepping up to the plate, we then see Joshua begin to go to the people and give them direction. He just goes right to it. Now look at what happens. Verse 16, it says, listen, and they answered Joshua, saying, all that thou commandest us we will do, and whithersoever thou sendest us we will go. You heard that, right? According as we hearken unto Moses in all things, so will we hearken unto thee. Only the Lord thy God be with thee, as he was with Moses. Whosoever he be that doth rebel against thy commandment, and will not hearken unto thy words, and all that thou commandest him, he shall be put to death. Only be strong and of a good courage. So what's happening here is Joshua has addressed the people. He's given them direction. He's explained to them what to do before they get ready to go into the land. He's explaining how things are going to play out when they do go in. And the people respond. First of all, we see that they responded to him. That's good all by itself. Some of the people could have ignored him. Some of the people could have had the mindset of, well, you're not Moses, so I'm not going to listen. So there are some people that could have walked off. They could have not listened. And when he spoke, they could have just not said anything. They could have just sat there and stared at him. I know what that feels like. I know how it is when you think you have friends and then you talk to them, or you're saying something to them on Facebook and they flat out ignore you, and they'll respond and say stuff to every little thing else that other folks have to say, and then they sit there and ignore you because they're too busy worried about what everybody else on Facebook that's looking might think or say, or what everybody else in person might think or say if there's other people around. They only want to communicate when they think it's just you and them there. But these people didn't do that. They didn't have this attitude of, well, let me look around and see what everybody else of God's people has to say. Let me wait and see if they're going to listen. Let me wait and see if they're going to respond to Moses. No, they listened and they responded. But they didn't respond negatively either. That's the other thing. In other words, they didn't respond talking trash. They didn't look at them and say, well, I'm not going to do what you say because you're not Moses. They didn't look at him and say, well, I was told by God to follow Moses, so now I'm not going to follow you. I just want to follow Moses, so I'm just going to follow him, and wherever he dies, now I want to die. I'll just sit down with him. I might be young, but I'm going to act like I'm 100-something years old like he is and come over here with him and just die off with him. Because I just want to sit still with him because I'm attached to him now. They could have done that instead of obeying and saying, yeah, we're going to do this. Whatever you say, we're going to do it, Joshua. Instead of saying, oh, we're going to obey you and not be rebellious. They could have flat out told them we're going to rebel and we're going to do things our way. And we're just going to keep going around making circles because we don't know you that well. They could have done all that. And some would say, well, what would have been the big deal if they had done it? Well, this is what the big deal was. If you think about it, if you recall, that's how some of them were with Moses. When Moses came along, and Moses knew that there would be some people that weren't going to listen to him, weren't going to believe that God had spoken to him to go to them, to talk to them about being set free. There were some people who were a little unsure of Moses. There were some people along the journey that were rebellious and didn't want to listen to Moses and question what he had to say. There were times when Moses had to say, stand back and see the salvation of the Lord. Do not be in fear. This is the Lord's battle. This is his winnings, his victory, or his battle, sorry, but the victory is ours, but the battle is his. He had to reassure them many times. So it would have been ridiculous for them to get with Joshua and be like, well, I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know you that well. They didn't know Moses that well to start with, and they had to trust him. So if God gives them somebody else, it only makes sense that they would take a moment to get to know him and learn to trust him as well before just throwing in the towel right off the bat. It would have made sense to do that instead of getting in their feelings and saying, well, we're attached to him. And see, that's something else that I find very interesting. This message could be for a variety of people, but let me say this, because this is what I was thinking about as I was getting ready for this message. If anybody listening right now, if this message feels like it's for you, and you're somebody that's heavily in church or ministry in some kind of way or another, and maybe this is for you, and maybe you know that God is getting you ready for something, but you know there may be some alignment changes. In other words, maybe you will be moved up into some type of leadership, or maybe somebody who is in leadership is going to have to move on, and God's going to give you somebody else to be a leader over you, a Joshua over you. It's funny how a lot of times people in ministry say this right here. They'll say, well, in ministry, we don't go by feelings. But as soon as God changes some stuff up, We want to rebel and be like, well, no, I don't want this leader because I don't know them that well. I want the one you just took from us because we've known him or her for X amount of years and we're attached to that person. So wherever they go, I got to follow them. Even though God's made it clear they can't take you into the promised land. But 5 minutes ago, what were we preaching? Well, in ministry, we can't go by feelings. But you're going, okay. We're going to go on. But you know what I mean? But when God changes some stuff up and he shakes some stuff up a little bit, all of a sudden, oh God, my feelings, I don't know how I feel about this. Even though you just yelled at somebody else about them going by feelings. So now you want to hold up all of God's progress over feelings. And just not even give the people that God's trying to use a chance. Because you're so sure they're going to screw it up. And then basically you're calling God a liar. Because you're saying he doesn't know what he's doing. And you know what's best and he doesn't. Okay. Anyway. All right. We're going to move right on along here. Go to 1 Kings. 1 Kings chapter 19. We'll just start here at the beginning. Let me say this to let you know what's going on. We know the story. We know how it played out. We know you had Elijah the prophet, mighty prophet of God. He was used by God greatly. And he had this huge victory on Mount Carmel, if you remember. And basically what had happened was there was a famine in the land, and it was all due to basically people not worshiping God, people not praising God, and people not speaking God's word. And so there was a lack of presence in that land, and so as a result there was a lack of rain, and so there was a lot of dryness. It was barren and dry in the land because, well, it wasn't being watered with the living waters, basically. And what ends up playing out is you had Jezebel, who was a very wicked, vile, rebellious woman who caused a lot of God's people to not speak up and not speak out. She was against God's people in general, but she really, really, really had a thing against the prophets of God. She really didn't want them to speak up. Why? Because that would put her in trouble. Well, what do you mean? Well, the prophets would have had to speak out against her and warn her of what was to come, the judgment to come of her, and warn others to not serve her. And basically, I'll put it to you this way. Jezebel was big on threatening people. And so it was almost like she would warn people to not warn others about her. I'm warning you, don't you warn nobody. That's basically what she was doing, to sum it all up, So she really had it against the prophets. And so you had God's prophets hiding in caves by the multitudes. And then there was this guy that basically had to go into these caves to feed the prophets food. And as I was pondering upon this before this message, I was thinking, if you think about it, these prophets were supposed to go out and feed the people, as in, speaking the word, spiritually feeding people. And because they weren't spiritually feeding people, they were hiding in caves and had to be fed simple meals by some random guy. So they can't get proper nutrition. They just get what they can. And they're not going out and feeding the people. Nor are they going out and evangelizing. They're not going out into the world to witness to people and to warn people of the judgments of what's to come. So they're barely getting fed because they got to wait on somebody to come and make his rounds and feed them. And the people aren't really getting fed spiritually. And so it's just a drought in which there's no rain, which there's no crops growing up. So then it's just going to make it even harder for people to get fed. So it's being made hard for the people to get fed physically because they're not being fed spiritually. It's just a lack of being fed. And those who need to be doing the main feeding, they're barely getting fed as it is. So if they really want to get fed and energized, they'd have to get up out of them caves and get to talking, Not just walk the walk, but talk the talk. Usually they say if you talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. Well, these prophets, they needed to do a lot more talking than walking, but, all of it, really. But it was just a mess. And so you have Elijah, who's the one that decides to stand up and to speak out. And he was the one that rounded up the people and basically said, how long will y'all be caught between two opinions? Either serve God, if he's your one true God, or you can serve Jezebel and the false gods and be a part of the false prophets and blah, blah, blah. Whatever you choose to do, but whatever you choose to do, do it. Don't ride the fence. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. In other words, let your yes be yes and your no be no. It is what it is. And so we know how it plays out. He calls everybody together. He has this huge victory on Mount Carmel, in which the other people who decided to choose to go by the ways of Jezebel called on their gods. Nothing happens. And then Elijah calls on the one true God, and then fire comes down from heaven, and it's this big spectacular event. And we know how it played out. He was looking good. A great win, a great victory. But let's look at what happened right after that. So here we are, verse 1, starting at the beginning of 1 Kings 19. It says, and Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and withal how he had slain all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me, and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. And when he saw that, he arose and went for his life, and came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat under a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might die, and said, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. And as he lay and slept under a juniper tree, behold, an angel touched him and said, arise and eat. So what's going on here is this. He has this huge victory, and Jezebel sends out a threat, that warning I was telling you about. She sends out a threat, threatens Elijah's life. Now, she doesn't come face to face and say it. She just sends someone else to go and tell him blah, blah, blah. And when he gets this threat, he runs and hides under a juniper tree. Isn't that interesting? He was just up on a huge mountain with a huge victory, and then he gets one tiny threat from some woman, which is really kind of strange, because in Old Testament, it seems a lot like the women are treated almost like second-class citizens. It's like they don't quite have the rights that a lot of the men have, and sometimes it seems like they get treated like property. But then you have this little Jezebel woman that can just send out a threat, and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, gotta run for my life. Oh God, take me, I'm no better than my fathers. What? Just over a simple threat. And that's where some of you may be. You may be in that position where just a little threat, just a little thing, just something simple that someone would say to you, or using someone else to say something to you. Something simple, even though you're doing great. You would think as high up as he was after what he just did, that huge victory, that a simple threat wouldn't stop him. But that's what's happening to you. You're letting just simple, oh so simple words that you shouldn't even believe. Because why would you believe the report of the enemy? If you just called fire down from heaven, why in the world would a threat from the person that you just, really, if anything, you should look at it as you've already defeated that person, because that person was playing the numbers game. Jezebel had the numbers game going on for her, but he pretty much just defeated all of her people on Mount Carmel. So now if it's just down to her and she's just some woman, why would a simple threat that you didn't even get from her face to face, just her sending somebody to you, why would that get you all wound up and afraid? Think about it. That shouldn't bother you that much, but it does. But it's causing you to run and go down low. Remember when I said the breaking down? He was high up on a mountain. Now he's down, probably low down in some valley under a tree somewhere. And it says that the angel basically had to feed him, fed him a couple of times. Getting fed, right? You got to stay in God's word. You got to stay in God's presence. You got to do it. You got to do it. You got to go to church. You got to praise him at home in your car. You got to get in that word. You got to listen to somebody preach the word. You got to read the word. You got to study the word to show yourself approved. You've got to be in the presence of God and get fed spiritually as much as possible. Yes, it is important to take care of your body and be healthy and eat good and exercise. And a lot of people, including myself, are on a big health kick right now. I've seen that a lot of people in the church are like, man, I gotta do something better with my body. And you have to, because the enemy is using things to make us sick by the junk that we put in our bodies. So we have to do that, but we've also got to feed ourselves spiritually. We've got to be spiritually fed more than anything. So we've got to be not just physically healthy, but spiritually healthy. We've got to be better about feeding ourselves and feeding one another. We've got to keep that energy built up. Remember I was talking about that, the energy in the sermon I did called Weird Science. We've got to do this the right way. And so that's all it is. It's the enemy sending things out because you're victorious. Kind of like how he was on Mount Carmel. You're being victorious, so he's got to send out little threats and little words to just do this to you right here. Make you slowly bow down. You're standing up, all high and mighty, but if he can just beat you down with fear and being terrified and with threats and confusion, he can break you down and cause you to shatter at the drop of a hat. You don't want that. So, let's keep going. Go with me to 1 Samuel. This is the last area we'll have to go to. 1 Samuel chapter 17. We'll start here at verse 1. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle and were gathered together at Shekok, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shekok and Ezekah in Ephesdammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span, and he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass, and he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders, and the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him, and he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. Let's look at this. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel. You caught that, right? What we see here is this. We have the Philistines. We have God's people, the Israelites. They're about to go up against each other in battle, or so it seems. However, this giant comes from amongst the Philistines named Goliath. We know how this plays out, the story of David and Goliath. Goliath, the giant, comes out there. And in these verses I just read, it shows all this armor that he has on. He's a huge guy. He's got on huge armor. And it's big and tough and heavy armor that the average Joe wouldn't be able to pick up. And armor that's so big and tough and heavy that even people who are in armies wouldn't be able to go out and walk around with that stuff on for very long without getting tired and wore out. This should just show you how big and tough this Goliath was, or at least appeared to be. And so he steps on the scene and he stands out from amongst the rest of the Philistines, and he's making a show of himself. And he's not spending a whole lot of time just bragging about himself, because what he's doing is he's hoping that the visuals are enough. He's hoping that when you look at him, you'll get afraid and dismayed. You'll be terrified. You'll think you can't win the battle, even if God says that you already got the battle won. The battle is really mine, but the victory is yours. And so he's hoping that the visuals, how people perceive him, will cause them to be afraid, and they were. But he did do some trash talking. And the thing that I wanted to point out to you is that even though he's got all this armor and the sword and everything, he really doesn't fight anybody. He just stands there and he talks trash. He tells these people, I defy you. I defy the armies of God. I defy you. I think nothing of you. I think very little of you. That right there is something that is said to cause friction. Something that is said to wear you out. So it's almost like he's thinking, I'm going to stand out. I want you to see me. But if that doesn't make you afraid enough, now I want you to be dismayed enough. And so to make you dismayed, he made you afraid with how he looked, but then he wanted you to be dismayed by saying simple little words like defy, a little 4-letter word like defy. I defy you. He could have went on about how he hated and couldn't stand you and wanted to kick your butt, but he just says something simple like, I defy y'all. I don't think much of y'all. I defy you. He's saying, as I'm standing here all tall, you look like little ants to me. You just seem like something I could step on and squash. You just don't seem like much. I think nothing of you. I belittle you. I'm here to humiliate you, to make you feel stupid, to make you feel like an idiot for even trying to stand up for yourselves and for each other. I'm here to defy you so that if you're not afraid enough, you'll be dismayed enough, and you will start to cower down lower and lower until you're down prostrate, laid out like shattered, broken pieces of glass, afraid and then dismayed, with little words and little threats and just little things to say. Defy. Simple word. But he's hoping it would cause them to be dismayed. It says, when Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. They were greatly afraid and dismayed. In other words, it worked. The visuals worked, and then his trash talking with simple words worked. They didn't know what to do. So now let's skip down to verse 32. It says, and David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight this Philistine. Here we have David, a guy who's known for having a big heart, a heart after God's own heart. And he's talking to Saul, who is the leader of God's people, the Israelites. And he's saying, listen, don't let any man's heart fail them. I got this. I'll take care of it. Don't let their hearts fail them. In other words, it's like he's saying, I've got heart. I'm here to help so that no one else's heart shall fail them, so that everyone else will have also a big heart for God. Don't let your heart turn away from God. Be not afraid, be not dismayed, be of strength and of good courage. Don't let your heart fail you. Believe God and not the report of the enemy, not the report of the Philistines, not the report of this Goliath that's out there talking trash. I got this. I'm going to show you what it means to have heart. I'm going to show you what this heart thing, this heart for God is all about. Stepping out on faith. 33, and Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. Saul is saying, I don't think you can do this, David. No offense, I don't think you can do it. You're young. This is new to you. But that Goliath, he's much older, and he's been doing this since his youth. He's got some experience on you. Verse 34, and David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. David feels probably like Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz. He's seen some lions and tigers and bears, oh my. Verse 35, and I went out after him and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. David said, moreover, the Lord hath delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear. He will deliver me out of the hand of the Philistines. And Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with thee. So what's David saying? He knows that he doesn't have the experience that all these other army men do. He's just a little shepherd boy. But he goes on to say, you know, I've tended the sheep, I've tended the flock, and when these other bigger, badder animals came along, ones that could have tore me apart, I defended the flock. We know that Jesus made it clear that the good shepherd will lay his life down for his flock, because a hireling won't do that. The hireling will simply be there because they're getting paid to do it. But anytime a wolf or anything that could be scary creeps in, that hireling will just run. But that good shepherd would stay and fight the battle for his sheep. And that's what David is saying. Saul was one where when it was time back in the day for him to watch over some flock, he would wander off and do his own thing at times where he needed to be there. David, on the other hand, when he tended the sheep, he tended the sheep. He was there during the good and the bad times. It wasn't about hiding and seeing how things play out and being worried about this and worried about that. David was concerned about the big picture. He had a heart for the flock just like how he had a heart for God. He actually cared. It wasn't about getting a spotlight. It wasn't about any of that. It wasn't about the fortune, the fame, the money. It wasn't about that. He had the heart. And so he's saying, listen, I know that y'all have some experience with this, and I don't have that experience. But I have experience with that, and y'all don't have experience with that. And I believe the experience that I had with that will help me with this new experience of this. See, here's the thing that some of you have to understand. This is what you must learn. What you have to learn is sometimes God will have you go through things that seem oh so simple and sometimes irrelevant, but really is there to prepare you for your greater. You might not see it at the beginning, but somewhere along the way, as you get to that light at the end of the tunnel, you begin to see it. You see a glimpse and you realize, wait a minute, wait just a minute. Maybe there was purpose in this. Maybe I was tested more than I thought I was. Maybe all this was all just preparation for what he's getting ready to do with me. And the experiences that you've had will help you with your future. Yes, you will have to deal with people who have experience with you in certain areas, and you'll feel a little intimidated and a little overwhelmed and a little out of your league. But if God says you're meant to be there, you're meant to be there. It's not about how worthy you are or how worthy you think you are. He has equipped you from things of the past and the present to help you with your future. And he will use that to help you bring new ideas and thoughts and perspectives to the table that people who have been in it for a while just can't do, because they don't know nothing about it. You can learn a thing or two, but those people can also learn a thing or two from you as well. And just as though there will be people that will try to make you feel like you need them, they'll find out the hard way, if they already haven't, that they're going to need you just as much as you would need anybody else. You're just as needed and just as valuable in the kingdom of God as anybody else is. If you're called, you're called. And listen, it's like the saying goes, God did not call the equipped. He simply called the called. He'll equip you. Want proof? Let's look at what happens next. It says, and Saul armed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of brass upon his head. Also, he armed him with a coat of mail. So Saul tries to arm David with his armor, even though really David's already armed. He doesn't have an armor, but God still has equipped him with something on the inside that's going to help him with the battle. But Saul is trying to give David his own stuff. Like, here, put on my stuff. But watch what happens. It doesn't work. Look at this. Verse 39, and David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go. So David essayed. In other words, he was quick about it. He was willing to go and ready to go and move forward. He was, listen, essayed, but not dismayed. I'm just having fun now rhyming some stuff. He was essayed, but he wasn't dismayed. Everybody else is afraid and dismayed, but David is essayed. I'm just having fun, y'all. But let's keep reading after that semicolon. It says, for he had not proved it, and David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off. David had to take off Saul's armor because he had already figured out the only armor he needed to have on was the armor of God, and he already had it on. Amen. Some of us need to realize, wake up and realize that it ain't always about being like this person and the next person. Just because somebody seems to be like a king or a leader or somebody in the spotlight don't mean you got to look and talk and act and walk and think just like they do to be a somebody. Because if God has called you, you're a somebody in Christ. He has equipped you. So when you have on the whole armor of God, when you are wearing Christ and willing to be an ambassador of Christ, that's all it takes a lot of times. You don't have to put on everybody else's armor. You don't have to mimic them. You don't have to have a copycat spirit. You don't have to do everything just like they do. You don't have to look just like them and walk in their style and their abilities. It doesn't have to play out that way. David had to just take it off. He didn't sugarcoat it or nothing. He didn't even try to keep going and try to fight sloppily with Saul's armor on. He just took it off and said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. This ain't going to work. Sometimes you just have to call it how it is. I'm sorry, but I can't do it. I can't look like you. I can't act like you. I can't think like you. I got to be who God has called and created me to be. If he wanted another you, well, he would have just kept using you. He wasn't looking for another Saul. He knew what he was doing. God knew what he was doing. Some of you right now, God is trying to do something with you. Maybe he's trying to bump you up to be a leader, and maybe he's trying to put a leader over you to help you get the job done. He's surrounding you or trying to surround you with people that you'll need to be hand in hand with as you be an army of God and walk into your promised land, because you're not going to just walk in that tunnel by yourself. He's trying to get some people with you to work together as a team, as the body of Christ. And the problem is that you're too busy trying to make everybody look like a Saul and think like like a Saul, even though the Saul has caused you a lot of trouble and a lot of heartache, and he has been part of your oppression and honestly some of your depression, whether you want to admit it or not. But you're trying to make everybody be a Saul, or at least be somebody like you. And some of you have failed to see the big picture. Some of you have gotten to a place where you think, well, this little scrawny David that God's trying to put in my life to help me, I don't know about him, or I don't know about her. I don't know about this person that's supposed to walk beside me, or this person that's meant to be a leader to guide me. I just don't know about them. They seem so different. I don't think I can take them serious, and I don't think anybody else is going to take them serious. You know what the funny part about that is? The truth of the matter is, for somebody out there listening, that quote unquote David, so to speak, that God is trying to give you to put into your life, that you keep rejecting and denying and having second thoughts about, you keep doing it because, first of all, you're too busy worried about what other folks are going to think and say, but you keep thinking you can't identify with that David. But I'm here to say to somebody right now, if you really want to get down to the truth, if you really want to be told the truth without you getting offended and getting all in your feelings and in your flesh, the truth is, if you would think about it, if you would pause and think and look in the mirror for a second, honestly, you can identify with that David. The problem is you're pretending like you ain't got jack squat in common with that David. But in reality, if you would quit with this facade and take off the mask, and you quit dressing up and acting like what the people around you expect you to, and you be the person God created you to be, you would wake up and realize that you can identify with that David more than you can that Saul. But while you're trying to change the David, David has been sent in your life so that you can be who it is that you're supposed to be. In other words, instead of trying to change the David, David is being put in place to help change you, not to be somebody else, but to be who you were supposed to be from Jump Street. It ain't about hurting you. It's about helping you. It's about getting you out of that hurt that you've been in, that you've been pretending you hadn't been in. You've been putting on a show. And you know, when I thought about this, getting ready for this sermon, you know what it made me think of? You know those old phone commercials that used to say, "Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?" What you need to be saying to some folks is, "Do you love me now? When I stop being the person you want me to be, do you love me now? When I stop putting on this stuff and acting like I'm somebody I'm not, do you love me now? When I stand in front of that mirror and pull back that mask I've been wearing to please you, are you still going to love me now? When I get in that mirror and wipe off all that clown makeup and I go, here I am, are you still going to love me?" That's what you need to be doing. Instead of trying to change the David, it's time for you to get ready to really love you. You've been so busy trying to love on somebody else. It's time for people to show their true colors. It's time for you to see who loves you for you. And what you need to be doing is asking folks, do you love me now? Do you love me now that I really am who I am now? That's what it's about. But you're missing a big piece. Let me keep going. I'm having fun now. I got to keep going, though. Let me keep going. I don't even know where I was at now. Let's see here. Give me give me a moment. Let's look at this. Verse 40, "And he took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of his brook." Let me pause and say this. What's a staff? It's a rod or a stick. Kind of like what Moses had. Remember when he had that rod? When he put out the rod, he raised it up. God split the water so they could walk across it, and then the waters came down and crashed over all the chariots and Pharaoh and the Egyptians. He had the rod. David has the rod, and he also has some stones. In other words, he's got the sticks and stones. And that goes to prove the point that I made at the start. That's the reason why the enemy is attacking you the way that he is, because he sees now, baby, you've got the sticks and stones. So he's just trying to see if the words will ever hurt you. Oh my goodness, but let me keep going. So he has the stones, and it says, and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had, even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine, and the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. When the Philistine looked about, he saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Now this is the part you need to realize. The thing about it is, you think that since you don't take them serious, and since others don't take them serious, the devil's not going to take the David serious that he's trying to bring into your life. But here's the thing you got to understand. We know how this story ends. In other words, this is what God's doing on purpose. God's bringing somebody in that the devil ain't going to quite take serious. Why? Because while the devil is laughing and having a good time and not taking David serious, David's going to come in with all that heart, with the full armor of God. And when the devil least expects it, because he ain't going to expect nothing because he don't take David serious, David's going to take out the enemy. Oh my goodness. In other words, that's the point. Your enemy ain't supposed to think nothing of David. So David he ain't even got to sneak up. David ain't even got to sneak up. David just walk right on up, and just keep on going. That's the whole point. He didn't even have to get that close to Goliath. He slung a stone with a slingshot. I don't know about you. When I think about a slingshot, I think about a little kid. I think about Bart Simpson with a slingshot, because I don't think about anything else that would make me think of an adult except for a gun. But with a slingshot, I think of a kid. That's all the more they weren't going to think of David. Oh, this is just a little kid. This is a little childish thing that God would choose. I don't understand, but that was part of the plan. Sometimes you ain't going to understand the plan, man. You ain't got to understand it. Just know that God has already got it figured it out. He's already figured it out, y'all. 45, then said David to the Philistine, comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. He's saying, you got your armor, and it looked like I ain't got on none, but let me tell you, baby, I got on the armor of God. 46, this day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the hosts of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not the sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. He's saying it, like I said it earlier, this is the Lord's battle, but we got the victory, baby. Verse 48, and it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. He throws the rock. It hits Goliath in the head. He falls. Why would a little rock defeat a huge giant? It wasn't about the rock. It was about the power and the strength that was in the rock. The power or the strength that is in our rock, capital R, Jesus. Again, he came with God, the armor of God. Verse 50, so David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out of the sheath, therefore, and slew him. Cut him up and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistine. Shout with a voice of triumph. Y'all know that song? Shout with a voice of praise. right? Shout unto God for the victory. Hey, hey, give the Lord a shout of praise. That's basically what happened. They didn't think much of David, but when David took out the giant, they had a shout of praise. They had a shout of triumph. They had a shout of victory. They knew what was going on. They knew what it was about. And the men of Israel of Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines until thou come to the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way to Sharaim, even unto Gath and unto Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines. And they spoiled their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem. And he put his armor in his tent. Did you see that? It's talking about the Israelites chasing after the Philistines and their spoils. In other words, what happened? They said, wait a minute. If God can use little old David, the one nobody took serious and the one that didn't look the part, if God can do that with David, he can do it with us. And they went in, and it says they chased after all of them. And they went in the enemy's camp and took back everything that the enemy stole from them and then some. I'm here to say it now. Don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed. Be arrayed. Be ready to go. Be ready for the battle. Whoever God uses and puts in your life to help you along the way, grab a hold of them and say, let's go. Even if they seem insignificant, even if they seem irrelevant, if God says hold on to them, hold on to them. Because if he can do it for them, he'll do it for you. The battle is his, but the victory is yours. Thank you for tuning in and listening. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this message. I pray that whoever needs it would tune in and listen. I pray that people would be bold and courageous. We were meant to be courageous, like the song says. Lord, I thank you. I give you the praise and glory. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.